Caroline Carnegie, Managing Director of Melbourne Victory Football Club. Welcome to the SportsPro podcast.
Thanks very much.
Let's dive straight in. I'm just interested to hear about your career path that led you to joining Melbourne Victory. How did you start, and where did you go, and how did you get to where you are today?
So I started off as a lawyer, and I was a partner at a global law firm, K&L Gates, and Melbourne Victory was a client of ours. I started by joining as company secretary, then joined the board, been on the board now and co-sec for 8 years, and a couple of years ago an opportunity arose to take on the MD position as well, and lead the club from an executive role, and it's been amazing.
Great stuff. And I guess you probably get asked this a lot. Did you grow up a football or a soccer fan, or are you a convert?
Probably a little bit of a convert. I mean, I grew up in Melbourne, so AFL was the dominant sport that my family and I went to. My husband, however, grew up in Sydney playing football, and so we've been together a very long time now. And so we used to sort of go to both coats together. So a little bit of a convert, but been around the game a long time now too.
And how did you find the transition going from law into a more, I guess, executive role and in a slightly different field? Did you envisage making that transition, or did the cards just line up that way, and how did you find that?
I think the cards sort of lined up that way. I'd probably always thought from earlier on in my career that I would move into more of a commercial role, but the firm I was at was great to me, and I sort of had been there for a long time, and I had a sports law practice and a mergers and acquisitions practice, so I was familiar with a lot of different sporting codes and had worked with a lot of them as well. I think being on the board made the transition pretty easy for me, so obviously there's a huge difference between being executive and administration to board, but just having the background on the club and the knowledge of it meant that transition was really smooth for me.
And a lot of people say it's a privilege to work in sport, especially for a football club, and one the size of Melbourne Victory as well, with its history. I suppose it brings pressure, but it brings excitement, but it also brings pressure. How do you deal with things like that, with the two of those?
Yeah, I think I genuinely say to a lot of people that I feel like I've got the best job in the world. I think there's something that's very hard to articulate, but something very special about Melbourne Victory, and I feel very privileged to have the position that I have. It's no secret for anyone that follows football in the A-League. We had a very challenging year last year, very difficult both on and off the pitch, and of course that comes with pressure because it's such an amazing brand. We've got amazing supporters and partners, and everybody is relying on you to make sure that Victory is where it should be. That hasn't happened for us last season, and it's certainly a focus of ours this season to make sure that we're dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's. Not that we weren't, but there were some sort of extenuating circumstances last year, and it goes with the job. You get the good and the bad, and I kind of thrive a little bit on the challenge of making sure Melbourne Victory gets to where it should be.
It's an interesting dynamic working in sport, particularly for a team. You have the stakeholders to appease, but you also have the fans as well, who are in effect stakeholders. How do you go about that? Bearing in mind, you're essentially, every time the players go out on the pitch, anything that happens off the pitch, you're going to be scrutinised for. It's quite a unique and interesting dynamic.
Yeah, it is, and I think we say the best fans and members going round, but that comes with more scrutiny probably than you see, particularly in Australia with a lot of other clubs. And one of the things that I think is really important is open communication, and you can't always say all the things that you might like to say, but I think generally your fans, this is their outlet. They're putting good money into it. They're passionate about it, and people react differently when they're passionate about something. But if you take them on the journey with you as to why certain things have happened or why decisions have had to be made, they may not like it, but they understand it. And the important part is that you include them so they feel part of the family. We don't always like our family, but we always love them, and then we move forward to the next chapter. And that's what's really important with us and our fans.
I think any football fan, regardless of whether it's whatever league or country their team is in, it's they want to have a vision for their club. It doesn't mean being at the top of the table all the time. Obviously, Melbourne Victory has that pedigree, so it's a slightly different dynamic. But it's making sure that their club has a vision that, I guess, the management, they're seen as trustees of the club. They're overseeing it, and for the good of the supporters. Does how in terms of translating that and your leadership style, you've mentioned kind of transparency already, but how would you describe your leadership style?
Yeah, I think it's difficult, and the cornerstone of a good leader is being able to be adaptable, and people need to be led in different ways, and different decisions need to be approached in different ways. And so I think, open communication, being adaptable, really knowing and honing your craft. And so for me, in terms of football administration, it's really knowing as much as I can about football, as much as I can about Melbourne Victory and our league, and making sure that I'm in a position to make the best decisions. That means that people want to be part of that with you as well.
And I guess, what is your vision for the club? To win, obviously, but I mean, it's a club. It's a community club. Is that? I'm sure it's more than just getting 3 points on the board.
Yeah, it's a lot more than that, and we've probably got to get better at telling the story of all the other things that the club does. And when I stepped into the managing director's role or CEO role a couple of years ago, we sort of reevaluated as you tend to do in cycles, what our strategic plan was at the club and what our vision and values were internally, not externally, but internally, and how we were managing that. And we, had a vision before that of being the best, and that sort of stayed at that. And we had some internal stakeholders and staff were saying, what does that really mean? Are we best because our membership number's the highest? Are we best because our revenue's the best? Do we have the best players, the most trophies? And are we really comparing ourselves to every other league when we're looking at that? And so we kind of stepped back and formed a vision together with our team, and that is that we want to lead, unite, connect and inspire people through football. So first and foremost is always trophies, but we have a unique position to do more. And, one of the really good examples for us of that is the club took on the Afghan women's national team when they fled Kabul. And, the majority of those girls landed in Melbourne, and when it was time for them to play football, they wanted to play together. And, Craig Foster, who was instrumental in bringing them out, and our director of football, John DeLutza, had a conversation. John came and spoke to me. I think it took about 3 seconds for myself and then the rest of the board to say, this is an unbelievable opportunity for us to use this to give back. And it's all of those sorts of touch points that make people want to be part of Melbourne Victory as well.
Is that what you're keen to create, a working culture that sort of encourages, collaboration, but also openness and fairness? Is that kind of what you're looking to create, and that is reflected in the work you do as a club?
100%. And I've been really clear with my team too. You might sit in a particular department, but we're all there for Melbourne Victory. So it doesn't really matter what your specific role is. If you see a gap or you see something we could be doing better, and it's for the betterment of the club overall, then I want you to raise it, and I want to have that open and honest culture so that people feel as though they can express themselves and then also get backed to see that come to fruition. So I think that's a really important part of getting everybody on the journey with you.
Yeah, I guess it's a blessing and a curse, sport, and football in particular, football clubs, the highs are that high and the lows are that lows. How do you handle the disappointment? How do you handle the criticism? Do you think you handle it better now than when you were younger, or is it an evolving thing?
I think it's evolving. I think it's easy to fall into a trap that the criticism is personal, because often it seems that way, and that's how it might come across, and people know you and they reference you, but it's really not. It's that emotional side of people having a connection, being invested in the club, and then being upset, outraged, happy, concerned, elated, whatever it might be, based on results and what they see. And that's where that communication piece is really important, because if they don't see all of the things that have gone into a decision or a result or a recruitment or whatever it might be, then it's really hard to get them involved and on board and keep them engaged. So I think it's important to know it's not personal, but it's that custodian piece that you spoke about before. And, that's what everybody is asking of us.
Do you find it difficult to switch off from work? I ask every CEO and MD this.
Absolutely.
That has been the universal answer. And actually nobody seems to have found a solution to it. I'm not going to ask that of you, but do you have sort of go-to things that you can help you switch off, even if it's only for a few minutes?
Yeah, I have 2 young girls, so I like to spend time with my daughters as well. We're a football family, so they come to the games and they're really invested. So it's great to spend time with them. I think when I was a lawyer and you record in 6-minute increments and you've got a deal, you kind of finish a deal and then you have a little bit of a break and then you move on to the next one. There's always more you can be doing in this role, which is why it's really hard to switch off when you think there's another opportunity here or there's another one there. I think for me, I get asked a lot around how do you balance with family and work and all those sorts of things. And there's also a little bit of a realisation that the concept of having everything all at the same time is a moving piece and a moving target as well. There'll be weeks where you're away and everything's work focused, and then there'll be other times where there's a little bit less going on and you can spend a little bit more on your personal life. So I think it's just a matter of listening to yourself. For me, I like being on. I constantly thinking of things, but I want to action them. So I think it probably works okay for me, but everybody handles it differently.
Do you find it difficult to delegate?
I think it's a journey. I'm getting better, I think, than I was previously. And it's always hard when, you want things done a certain way, but I have an amazing team of people around me at Melbourne Victory, and I think that in itself makes delegation easier because you know and trust that the decisions they make and what they do are going to be the right ones, or in the event that they're not, they're going to learn from them and the club will move forward as well.
And I guess it goes back to the point you made earlier as well of it can be easy to take the good, but certainly the bad personally. Are you able to sort of get in a headspace where you feel you have perspective and I guess don't let it linger and maybe try and learn from it instead?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's never going to help the club or my role if I let it linger. So it feels like I should break out into a song when using those.
Can you name the answer?
Yeah, but you've got to be able to move forward and then use it in a better way to sort of benefit the club. And if it gets to a stage where you can't do that, then I think it's a really difficult role to fulfil with that mindset.
The sports industry at the best of times has been a male-dominated sector. And then I guess football, particularly a men's league, is even more so. I have to apologise. I don't know the amount of the numbers of women running football clubs in Australia. Thank you very much. Sorry for the listeners. It's the one, and you're sat right in front of me. We'll go into detail on this, but just to kick things off, really. What's that like?
Yeah, look, my background is legal industry, which won't surprise you, is also male-dominated. So, I spent 14 years running a coterie group for an AFL club before sort of heading into the football world. So I think probably for my journey, I've always been in male-dominated industries and probably don't notice it perhaps as much as others may. The important part for me is I don't like being asked the question of what it's like being a female CEO, what it's like being a female managing director, because I don't want the conversation to be around me being a female. I want it to be around whether I'm doing a good job or not, and hopefully a very good job as Melbourne Victory CEO.
And do you feel more is being done in Australian soccer to help encourage to get more women into the game, but from grassroots all the way up to executive level? Yeah,
I think there's been a huge focus, particularly leading into and off the back of the Women's World Cup being hosted in Australia and New Zealand. There's a Legacy 2023 piece that sits along with that, and there's also government parameters that we have around sort of a 40-40-20 gender principle. So I think there's a lot of work being concentrated on doing that. I also think there needs to be the balance of a recognition that maybe it's slightly harder, but also not to always bring it down to a gender discussion, because then some women who are where they want to be feel as though all the conversation diverts to, are they there because they're a woman as opposed to because they earn the right? And it's a really tricky one to navigate.
Yes, and I should say we're talking a couple of hours after your session at SportsPro APAC, and one of the points you made was, and we're right in the middle of the Women's World Cup. Sam Kerr, the Australian captain, she is internationally your best known athlete, and I sort of took a moment to think, then is there anything to compare? Domestically you've got the AFL, but outside of the home market, I don't. It probably doesn't stretch. I was thinking of cricketers, but again, and then you look at the numbers the Women's World Cup's doing. But I think that's a testament to the strength of the Matildas brand, but also how women's soccer and soccer as a whole in Australia is really on an upward trajectory.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think, Sam is amazing, and she is the most recognisable male or female athlete of any sport from Australia at the moment, has been for a little while, and hopefully will be for a long time to come as well. So we're really lucky, particularly in our sport, that we've got someone like her. And it's not just Sam. There's a lot of girls that are in the Matildas team that are championing the same cause. But I think just with the profile that Sam's got, we're lucky that we're able to, I guess we're in a time where she's as popular and as well known as she is. Certainly exceeds all of the other sports that we're looking at, and it gives us a really great platform to have Sam as the Matildas captain, to see the success of the girls now getting out of the group stage, and to really work with our state bodies and our national teams to create a true pathway for football, which will then help it explode in the country.
Absolutely, and a rising tide floats all boats. It'll benefit the A-Leagues, it'll benefit the grassroots game,
That's
participation.
Right.
So
that's right.
And maybe a couple more women working in the senior roles at clubs.
That's right.
Great stuff. Let's just talk a little bit more broadly about, I guess, well, hindsight's a wonderful thing, but you've been in your current role for how long now?
2 years.
2 years. I guess when you made the transition from legal into, and then working exclusively in a more commercial role for Melbourne Victory, what would you say, if you could talk to yourself then, in terms of advice, what would you say to yourself?
That's a good question. Look, I think when I stepped into the role, Victory had finished bottom of the ladder. I think, we had some difficulties on and off the pitch, and fan engagement and a whole heap of things that probably were not where they should have been. And at the time I thought, there's a number of tasks that needed to be done, and then you get back to business as usual. And I've come to realise there is no business as usual, and no matter how much you plan or organise the top 10 things you want to do for the day, the week, the month, there's always going to be something that's thrown at you, either from a football or administration perspective. And so I think just having that insight when you start just helps you kind of get the runs on the board maybe a little bit quicker, or not get as concerned around some of the things that you face, because it's always going to be that way.
Changing the culture at any organisation is difficult, particularly, and then in a football club, there are so many different facets. Things could be going well off the pitch, but it could be not be going on, and vice versa. I imagine it's trying to sort of turn around a huge ship. In terms of how you work with your colleagues, in terms of how you implement it. Is it about being open and being transparent, having a clear vision? And I guess it's one thing saying it, it's another thing doing it. So for you, when you talk to your staff, what are the key messages you try and get across, and how you talk to people?
I think the big part, apart from the open and honest communication, backing your staff, and also giving them the imprimatur to do more than just sit within their own wheelhouse and really look for the benefit of the club overall. It's just, putting faith in the people that you've got there, and making sure that people are all on the journey together. There really isn't a downtime in a football club. Some businesses are seasonal, and you get your ups and downs, and mergers and acquisitions was like that, and the amount of people that say you're in the off season, it must be quiet for you now, but that's when everything's happening for the following season. And so it's taxing for a lot of people, and everybody probably has their time where enough is enough. And so it's making sure you've got the relationships and the opportunities to speak to people, and they know we've got to make sure that every single person in our business is on the train, and they have the breaks they need to, but they're still invested in the vision. And if that's not the case, then sometimes it's time to part ways as friends, but to get the next breed of people in who are really enthusiastic about fulfilling the vision that you've got. So I think it's, a big part of leadership or being CEO of a football club is not just touching and feeling everything that goes on, but the people management perspective, and really being in tune with your people. So I think that's an important part of it.
And what would be your number one piece of advice for someone looking to develop their leadership skills?
I think it's being open to learning new styles and being flexible in the way that you address and deal with people. As I said, I think people management is a huge part of it. And, everyone's got their own style, but I don't think that, you walk in, you thump your hand on the table and you move forward. It's not the way that you motivate and inspire people. And so for anybody that's looking to move into that role, I would just challenge them to think through all of those sorts of things. I think sometimes there's a perception that you walk in and it's what you say goes. You need to be open, you need to have good people around you, you need to trust those people, and then together that you'll make the journey successful.
Do you find yourself referring to back to any people you read about or any people you work with when it comes to leadership and when difficult decisions have to be made? Do you have any influences in that regard?
I don't think I do. I don't have someone that I sort of have as a poster boy or girl that I look up to. I think what everybody does along the journey is when you have a leader that either has lost your trust or your faith, or that you learn more from, certainly for me, from the negative experiences, and try to keep that with you so that you don't do the things that were upsetting or didn't work for you to other people. So it's probably more those real life examples as opposed to having somebody that's in that mentoring space or that I've sort of had that sort of close relationship with from my perspective.
Great stuff. Well, Caroline, thank you for joining us on the SportsPro podcast, and thank you for speaking at SportsPro APAC. Wish you the best luck for the next season.
Thank you, no problems.